جيش لا توضع أمامه خطوط حمراء.
Good afternoon on this Wednesday, April 2nd. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. The Lebanese army spreads into new areas of Tripoli as part of its crackdown to restore stability in Lebanon's second largest city. Civil servants and teachers hold a general strike in protest of Parliament's delay in passing a draft law to boost their salaries. And a police chief is killed and 5 others injured in 3 explosions outside Egypt's Cairo University. The Lebanese army is spreading into new areas of Tripoli, including the restive neighborhood of Beit Tabene, as part of its crackdown to restore stability in Lebanon's second largest city. Military troops deployed in Syria Street, which separates the rival neighborhoods of Beit Tabene and Jabal Muhsin, as well as in the neighborhoods of Bazaar and the vegetable market. The Lebanese army is raiding the homes of those wanted by authorities and is working on dismantling bunkers and earth mounds erected during the clashes. An army statement says the military has arrested 75 individuals, including 27 Palestinians and Syrians, for suspicion of involvement in clashes. The crackdown is part of a larger security plan for Akkad and Tripoli that went into effect just yesterday. The March 14 General Secretariat is hailing the implementation of the security plan in Tripoli, hoping it will put an end to the suffering in the northern city. After its weekly meeting, the group says it hopes the army and security forces will arrest all the wanted suspects regardless of their affiliations, especially those behind the twin bombings of the Taqwa and As-Salam mosques back in August of last year. The group adds that the government's bold political decision to execute the plan aims at applying the law and meeting the demands of the residents of Tripoli, who for 3 years have demanded that officials put an end to their suffering. Civil servants and teachers hold a general strike in protest of Parliament's delay in passing a draft law to boost their salaries. All public school teachers and vocational academies shut down in response to the Union Coordination Committee's call for a day-long strike. Hundreds of protesters gathered near Parliament in Riyadh al-Sulh Square at 11 this morning, coinciding with the start of a legislative session. Education Minister Ilyas Bousaad joined the protesters in a sign of solidarity. Hanna Gharib, the head of the Public School Teachers Association, has hinted at holding an open-ended strike and boycotting official exams if the wage scale is not approved. The protest comes a day after Parliament began a 3-day meeting to discuss a number of bills, but is yet to schedule a debate the salary increase in light of the Joint Committee's failure to decide on a means to finance the wage hike. Speaker Nabih Berri has called on the Joint Committees to convene this Friday and finalize the draft law, a move hailed by the UCC. In other local news, Parliament approves an amended version of the disputed draft law to grant contract workers at Électricité du Liban's full-time employment. As parliamentarians convene to resume discussions over draft laws from Parliament's 70-item agenda, they endorsed the modified draft law, appeasing workers who have been pressuring for their demands. The draft law stipulates that the Council of Civil Service would hold examinations for over 1,000 workers to fill EDL's vacant positions. The amendment includes workers' demands that their expertise should be taken into consideration during the test. The amended law also agreed to pay compensation for workers above the age of 56 and is worth 2 months' payment for every working year in the state-run electricity company. President Michel Sleiman is calling for the election of a strong head of state who pledges full loyalty to Lebanon. In a speech at the Babda Palace, he says the new president should be strong and consensual if possible, or should belong to a certain political camp and be fully loyal to the country. He adds that the new president should follow up the discussions on the National Defense Strategy and the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. He stated this, that Lebanon cannot build a state without having a defense strategy to protect everybody, including the resistance. He also stressed that the new president should seek to implement the decisions reached at the national dialogue, including the Babda Declaration. Sleiman added that decentralization consolidates national unity and diversity and also encouraged partnership between the public and private sector, creating job opportunities for the youth. The head of the opposition in exile made a rare trip to Latakia province in Syria. The National Coalition President Ahmed Jarba met with rebels fighting Assad's troops in the coastal province, including the recently captured Armenian town of Kassab. Assad's family hails from Latakia, the scene of a fierce 11-day now battle in which rebel groups, including the Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front, have made significant gains. Thus far, they've captured a border crossing with Turkey and a slice of the coast that gives them access to the Mediterranean Sea. Jarba also toured Latakia's rebel-held mountainous areas of Jabal al-Turkmen and Jabal al-Akrad, meeting with rebel commanders to assess the latest plans and needs for the battle on the coast. This week, the regime has claimed it has seized the key observation post, which overlooks some of the contested area. This is according to activists and rebels on the ground. Coming up next, hopes of breakthrough in negotiations with Israel fade after Abbas pursues efforts to join 15 UN agencies. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Future TV. A police brigadier general has been killed along with 5 others, including the assistant interior minister in Cairo, Egypt. They have been injured in 3 explosions outside the university in Cairo and Giza Governorate. Officials are saying the bombs went off second apart and that the explosive devices had been concealed in a tree between 2 security posts. The officer killed was identified as General Tariq al-Mirjawi and was a chief detective who would have dressed in civilian clothes. Egyptian state television says the explosions happened in the university's engineering faculty during clashes between students and security forces. The country's security forces have been targeted in frequent attacks since a military coup toppled former President Mohamed Morsi last summer. A senior Palestinian official has said there is no link between the Palestinians' move to join international organizations and a return to the negotiating table with Israel. The comments from Yasser Abed Rabo, the Palestine Liberation Organization's Director General, comes a day after President Mahmoud Abbas said he had begun steps to join 15 international agencies and conventions, leading to speculation that negotiations with the Israelis have collapsed. A Palestinian source says that Abbas was willing to hold off on sending applications to these international organizations should Israel release the final batch of detainees jailed before the 1993 Oslo Peace Accord as originally agreed between the parties. Rabo says Israel's failure to release the last batch of detainees left the Palestinians with little choice but to turn to international bodies. He said that the Palestinian move did not constitute a breach of the terms of the agreement, which brought about a resumption of peace talks in July of 2013. Suspected Al-Qaeda militants launched a rocket and car bomb attack on an army headquarters in Yemen's main southern city of Aden that left 6 people dead. The assailants fired rocket-propelled grenades at the headquarters in the Tawahi district of Aden before infiltrating the complex. They also blew up a car bomb at the entrance. Reports say 3 soldiers and an attacker were killed in an exchange of fire, adding that 2 passerbys also died in the assault, which he said was believed to be the work of Al-Qaeda. Gunmen from Al-Qaeda affiliated group Ansar al-Sharia carried out a similar attack on an army headquarters in the southern province of Hadramaut in October, taking hostages and leaving 12 people dead. A massive magnitude 8.2 earthquake and tsunami hit the northern coast of Chile and prompted a tsunami warning for the country's Pacific coast. Interior Minister Rodrigo Penalillo says 5 people were confirmed dead and attributed the deaths to heart attacks or being crushed. According to officials, the first waves hit the coast within 45 minutes of the quake, adding that the disaster forced evacuations along Chile's Pacific coast for fear of a tsunami. The waves generated were 2.11 meters tall. Thousands of buildings have lost power and hundreds of thousands of Chileans are spending the night away from their homes due to the evacuation order, which remains in effect for northern Chile. Chilean President Michelle Bachelet declared parts of northern Chile hit by the earthquake to be disaster zones. She added that she will travel to the regions of Arica and Tarapacá and send military officials to the areas to prevent looting and disorder. NATO says it will suspend all practical civilian and military cooperation with Russia because of Moscow's occupation and annexation of Ukraine's Crimea region. The decision was taken by the military alliance's foreign ministers in Brussels, who urged Russia in a statement to take immediate steps to return to compliance with international law. NATO and Ukraine announced in a joint statement that they will intensify cooperation and promote defense reforms in Ukraine through training and other programs. The suspension of military cooperation comes as NATO says it has seen no sign that Russia was withdrawing troops from the Ukraine border, according to the alliance's Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who said he could not confirm Russia's withdrawal. Ministers from the 28 alliance member nations have met for the first time since Russia's military occupation and annexation of Crimea. Still making headlines, Malaysian authorities meet with Chinese relatives of passengers of the missing flight MH370 in Kuala Lumpur in a closed meeting away from the media. Meanwhile, a multi-nation search for wreckage from the plane is still underway in the Indian Ocean. More developments in this report.
An international fleet of aircrafts have taken off from the Royal Australian Air Force Base Pearson, Perth, Australia this morning, despite sea fog and thunderstorms. Over 3 weeks after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, rescue teams continue search efforts to find any evidence that could resolve this unprecedented incident. Up to 10 planes and 9 ships will be involved in today's search, according to the Joint Agency Coordination Center, which is in charge of the search for the missing aircraft. But aviation expert Jeffrey Thomas says ocean conditions are also hindering efforts to locate the debris for ships out at sea.
The folks that are searching at water level, sea level, it's very difficult. It's rough, lots of white caps, rain, cloud. It's very, very difficult to spot debris, but they're there for the long haul. They're just going to keep on searching until we find it.
Nevertheless, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has vowed that his country will continue the search for the missing Malaysian airline jet for as long as possible.
It's one of the great mysteries of our time. It's a terrible tragedy. There are 239 devastated families. There are a lot of very concerned people right around the world, and Australia is leading the search and recovery effort, as is right, given that it all happened in our search and rescue zone. We owe it to the world, we owe it to those families to do whatever we reasonably can to get to the bottom of this. Just awful, just awful. To lose a loved one is terrible, but to have a loved one disappear in such circumstances, in such mysterious circumstances, is just devastating, and it must be almost unbearable for those families, and I can fully understand why so many of them are just so desperately anxious and so desperately unhappy, and this is why we need to give them the reassurance that we will not rest here in Australia until we've done everything we reasonably can to get to the bottom of this.
Meanwhile, Malaysian authorities have met with Chinese relatives of passengers of missing flight MH370 at a hotel near Kuala Lumpur. The meeting was closed to the media, but the Malaysian Civil Aviation Department Director General said it was a very good meeting, and authorities answered all their questions. This comes after a Malaysian authority being accused by a group of Chinese relatives that believe they have lied about the plane's disappearance.
On that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our top stories. The Lebanese army spreads into new areas of Tripoli as part of its crackdown to restore stability in Lebanon's second largest city. Civil servants and teachers hold a general strike in protest of Parliament's delay in passing a draft law to boost their salaries. And a police chief is killed and 5 others injured in 3 explosions outside Egypt's Cairo University. Those wrap up your Wednesday headlines live on Future Television. From me and the team here at Future, have a good day.
جيش لا توضع أمامه خطوط حمر